whether somebody else will label me as an empath or not, that if I, instead of pushing it away, embrace this ability and see how it can manifest and aid me in my life and aid others as well, that I can really start to understand it and really start to use and live with this kind of sensation that I deal with on a regular basis. So I recently started dating this guy, and when I was going out with him, I was given the opportunity on a couple occasions to express how I was feeling about, whatever situation we were in. And I discovered that I was having a really hard time doing that. And this is not actually the first time that something like this has occurred for me, but this was the first time that I've actually considered what that means. And I've known for a while that I pick up on the emotions of the people around me, but I never really considered using the word empath for it, because I'm just really sensitive to the emotions of the people around me. I don't understand what that means, but it seems ridiculous to call it an empath, because it's not like I can say what emotions they're feeling or, like read their minds or anything like that, which is kind of what I've associated with empaths before. But after this date, I ended up going home and I started to process through the experience. And I was like, well, why is it that I am having such a hard time expressing my emotions in that moment? And I realized it was because even at home, I was still having a hard time figuring out which emotions were mine specifically. So I kind of had to sift through this wave of emotional baggage to kind of pinpoint what exactly was my emotion versus somebody else's. And I think it was for this reason that I decided to finally embrace the label empath and maybe start to learn a little bit about this aspect of myself. And to a certain degree, I need to thank Teal Swan. You may have heard of her. She's a spiritual teacher. And I've seen her on YouTube, but she was discussing in one of her videos about how we tend to push away aspects of ourselves throughout our lives for various reasons, but it's only through embracing them that we can really reincorporate them back into our system and become a whole, authentic individual. So I decided at this point that whether somebody else will label me as an empath or not, that if I, instead of pushing it away, embrace this ability and see how it can manifest and aid me in my life and aid others as well, that I can really start to understand it and really start to use and live with this kind of sensation that I deal with on a regular basis. Now, part of the reason why this was so evident on this date, why it was so evident that I struggle with expressing my emotions in the moment, was because the guy I'm dating, he actually is a very good communicator. He can express his emotions and his thoughts articulately and clearly within any given moment, and process through things relatively quickly. And while I can't necessarily tell you that I'm a great communicator, I mean, that's up for you to decide. I think I do a pretty good job of communicating my ideas and whatnot pretty clearly. But for me, I can only ever express emotion after the fact, like after I've processed through the entire situation, which could mean a day, a couple days, or possibly even a week later. And often that can make the emotional side come off a bit cold or calculating, because by the time I've finished processing through it, the emotion is no longer raw. So then I'm just kind of stating facts or rehashing history. It's not the present moment, so it doesn't feel as connected or deep as it would probably if somebody didn't have this kind of situation going on. And I remember after this date, the guy asked me, well, what would happen if you just expressed your emotion in the moment? And I went, I'm not entirely sure I can even do that. I have never processed my emotion right there in the moment. It's, I don't even know how to go about doing something like that. It's never been the way that I worked. So more than likely, if I were to try to express my emotion in the moment, it would take me some processing time. I'd have to be quiet for a couple minutes and enter my body and try to find what exactly it is I'm feeling. And even if I can pinpoint the emotion, more than likely what I will say is something that is rationally true, or at least a part of what I'm feeling, but is not the whole truth and could potentially come off as hurtful because it's expressed out of context. And that's not a good thing. So I tend to reserve my expression for a later time, but it's not as raw as it is for like him to express. And over the years, I've gotten pretty good at focusing my attention so that I can maintain a high vibration and not be completely overwhelmed by the emotions around me. So this got me asking questions like, so what exactly is going on inside that makes me act this way? So I started to look at my life and recognize that when I go outside or when I'm visiting with members of my family in my own house, there are moments where I inevitably take on their emotions. If somebody's feeling depressed, I often find myself feeling, low energy and kind of sad and prone to melancholy thoughts and things like that. And in many degrees, it's confusing because I'm like, well, why am I melancholy right now? Nothing really has happened. So what exactly brought me to this emotional state? And it really is just an automatic thing, and I can't pick and choose what emotions I pick up on. But I have found that if I focus on my own emotional well-being often enough and keep my vibration high, I usually won't be pulled into somebody else's emotions. Instead, I maintain my emotion, which then allows their emotion to exist as well, and then potentially allow the space for that emotion to be expressed and possibly even resolved. So the intensity of my focus, which I have developed through necessity of living through experiencing other people's emotions along with my own, has led to an intense focus that allows other people to process their emotions better as well, which is kind of cool. And I suppose the best way to kind of describe this sensation is kind of like if we all lived in a pool and every single person's movement generates kind of a ripple effect. So what happened was somewhere along the way, I became a very fragile, sensitive person. So, I can feel every single ripple that comes in my direction. And even the smallest ripple can knock me over, assuming that I haven't developed the strength or the density to deal with it. And given that humans are not stationary and unchanging, in this pool that represents our emotions and our lives, everybody is constantly moving. So if I don't do anything and just allow the emotions around me to come, I will very quickly be completely overwhelmed by all of the movement and all of the ripples, and I will be battered around like a ship in the storm. Possibly even banged up against the walls of the pool and end up bruised and battered or whatever the case may be. So as I've gotten older, I've learned how to withstand those attacks. And they're not really attacks, but I've been able to better prepare myself to be confronted by those emotional states or by those ripples. I'm better able to handle them at this point. And the way that I learned to do so was by focusing my attention. And a good way to describe this is I am able to increase or decrease my density in the pool at will. So when I focus, I become more and more dense, which means that the ripples stop affecting me as much. They still hit, and I still recognize them, but they're no longer overwhelming me. I can hold my ground. The downside of that is that as a more dense individual, as somebody with a strong focus, I also have greater influence, which means that in the pool analogy, if I were to move, the ripple I create is much stronger when I'm in my high dense state. So if I have a strong focus, the ripple I create will affect more people and on a stronger level and could overwhelm them as well, which is great when I'm in a positive state of mind, because that means that I can lift people up. I can influence them to process through their emotions and then move to a higher emotional state so that they're happier and better able to handle the world around them. But if I'm in a negative emotional state, now I can unintentionally force everybody around me to feel as crappy as I do, which is part of the reason why I work so hard to maintain my positive outlook on life, which therefore means I have to get really good at processing my own emotions and recognizing them for the messages that they are, so that I'm not influencing everybody so that they feel as bad as I do in whatever moment. One of the bad things about emotions is that negative emotions are much easier to focus on, usually because you have a negative emotion in reaction to some other life event. So, say somebody punches you, and I use this concept a lot, but somebody punches you and you react in anger automatically. It's not shocking that you react in anger, but it's a very focused anger, very, very powerful emotion. Now, you could obviously interpret that punch in many different ways, but whatever the case may be, that intense anger focus is going to influence other people around you a lot. And we don't really have strong, visceral, positive emotions very often. Every now and then you do, like when somebody surprises you with something that you really like, or, you see somebody that you haven't seen in a really long time, and you're super excited to see them. That's a very strong, positive, emotional focus. But those are actually much rarer, and I think the reason being that our natural state is a positive state, so it's more natural for us to have a strong reaction on the negative side of the scale, because it's not necessarily natural for us to be negative. You can agree or disagree as you so choose, but that seems to be what works for me. So if you look back at this pool analogy, there are two essential factors here. You have the density of the individual, and you have the emotional state. A high density, high emotion state influences the people around them, whoever they may be, in a strong positive way. It brings everybody up. Whereas a low density, low emotion, such as a light frustration, is not going to have a very big ripple effect. It's not going to affect that many people. So your emotional state and your quote-unquote density is a determining factor in how much influence you have in the world. And anybody can develop either of these skills. Like, you can practice triggering particular emotions in your brain and living from more positive states or even more negative states if you want to. And you can also learn to increase your focus, which therefore increases your density in the pool. So focus and emotion are both two skills that you can develop if you wanted to. I definitely caution you because, as I've said, when you have intense focus, which I have developed fairly naturally, you're not always aware of how much you're affecting other people. So you have to be aware of that. You have to, keep an eye out for the possibility that you're influencing people in ways that you did not intend to. So when I look back at this date that I had with the guy, what I discovered was that I hadn't been practicing my focus particularly well in the last few months. And part of the reason is because I've been focused on YouTube, which means that I'm then not really working on my emotional well-being very much, which, that's on me. There's no other reason. But on that date, I was in a low density, I wasn't particularly focused, which is not shocking. I mean, anytime you're out on a date with somebody, you're probably a little confused and, up in the air wondering what exactly is going to happen, and so on and so forth. But I was also in a very high emotional state. So the high emotional state meant I was able to roll with the emotions of the people around me, and I wasn't being brought down by their emotions, but I was taking on and absorbing the emotions of the people around me because I was in a low density or low focus form. So by the end of the date, I was so filled with the emotions of everybody we'd come in contact with that day, which was a lot, and I had no clue what exactly I was feeling. And when I went home and started working through these emotions, it actually took me a couple of days to process through. And by the time I'd finished processing through all of the emotions, I hit a point of burnout where I was completely and utterly void of emotions for a little bit because I had dealt with so many for so long that I just couldn't handle anymore. And that's not necessarily terrible. I mean, a couple hours or a day of burnout is, really not that bad, all things considered. But had I not come to recognize the need for me to refocus on embracing my focus and my emotional well-being, the burnout could have been much, much worse. So that led to this whole empath discussion. And I wanted to share this video just in case any of you guys are suffering from something similar, and encourage you to start considering these concepts as well. I also think this could be a good video so that other people can kind of understand what's going on with individuals like me. You might not necessarily experience the same thing, but personally I believe everybody is at least slightly empathic, so you should have at least some idea about what's going on. But if you do suffer from overwhelming emotions of other people, definitely start working on your emotional well-being and on your focus. Practice your meditation, practice your positive thoughts, and learn to process your negative emotions as well, because negative emotions do have value as they tell you which direction to move in. And I will be doing another video on the value of all emotions later on, but keep that in mind. Your positive and your negative emotions are valuable and are telling you something about your life, and you should listen. So for all of the other potential empaths out there, don't be afraid to embrace this aspect of yourself. Don't be afraid to accept that label and to start exploring this, because ultimately, even if you aren't an empath, it should benefit you to know and understand this world a little bit better. I know that it's going to be a bit of a process for me. This is an area that I haven't really explored very much. But I definitely know that learning more about it and starting to embrace this aspect of myself is going to help me have a better life overall. And, my life isn't bad or anything, but I'm always looking to improve. So that's everything that I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you would be so kind as to head on over to my Patreon page and support me there, give me a little financial boost and let me know that my work is valuable, I'd love to have you as a financial contributor. You can contribute just $5 a month, and I will be ecstatic to have that support. Additionally, if you like this video, make sure you click on the like button and subscribe to the channel, or so that you can have access to all the other videos easily. I also recommend clicking on the notification bell so that you're notified when new videos are posted. And then leave a comment. Let me know how this subject relates to you. Have you experienced people who are like this? Did this video help you understand something about yourself or somebody in your life? I'd really like to know what you think about that. So, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you again soon. Bye.